And now for our final story of today's show. Producer Eric Marchin takes an in-depth look into crime solving and the real-life forensics officer. After watching, you'll definitely have a different perspective on how criminals are brought to justice. Let's take a look.
Right now, a breaking and entering is taking place, and sometimes, unfortunately, it leads to a homicide. But it gives me a little bit of comfort knowing that the men and women of FIS are dedicated and skilled and always work on these types of crimes. Let's take a further look into this crime and see if we can't help solve it.
Our job here at Forensic Identification Services is to collect evidence, physical evidence that might be present at a crime scene. So we would attend at the scene of a crime. We would search for physical evidence, a piece of paper to a bottle to a fingerprint to a drop of blood.
The intruder has left a very important piece of evidence on this beer bottle. What I'm talking about is a fingerprint. I'm not going to touch it with my hand, but I am going to take it to FIS for Irv Albrecht to analyze.
In this particular case, this bottle, we're going to do a quick examination looking for fingerprints on the outside of the bottle. In this case, we'll use some fingerprint powder to see if we can further develop any fingerprints that might be on this bottle. So you can see in this case, quite a few fingerprints are on here, and now they're quite easily seen after a small amount of fingerprint powder has been applied to the surface. On television and movies, quite often what a person sees is a fingerprint being inputted or fed into some sort of a computer or machine, and the computer searches that fingerprint and a match is made and an identification is made. In reality, things don't quite work that way and that easily. Fingerprint identifications are made by a human being, by a person who is examining a fingerprint impression and comparing a fingerprint impression. When it comes down to deciding, is this fingerprint the fingerprint of an accused person or a suspect, the identification is made by a forensic officer making a comparison between the found or latent fingerprint to a known fingerprint.
As you can see, the intruder has carelessly cut himself and has left a blood stain on this side of the cupboard. Now, police can identify who the intruder is through DNA and find out how tall he is through the blood splatter itself. Let's see what Irv Albrecht has to say about this.
Crime scenes we go to, there's been some sort of events that have led to a bloodletting of some sort. That blood is very important evidence quite often because blood contains DNA, and now with the advancement of science, DNA can be used to identify a suspect and put him at the scene of a crime. So in this particular case, we have a small amount of blood on this beer bottle, and we want to capture that evidence so that we can have that blood analyzed, and then that evidence can ultimately be brought to court. Now I'm going to collect a small amount of this material on this bottle. This particular material here is used for detecting the presence of blood. On the end of this small strip is some chemical that's sensitive to the presence of blood. So when I apply the sample of blood, or the sample of material suspected to be blood from the bottle to this pad, we get a color change and the pad turns from yellow to green, and that's an indication that this material is in fact blood.
Now a vital piece of evidence can be in the form of a footprint, and what the people at FIS do is they analyze the pattern of the shoe, the make, the model, and size, and can find out about the assailant just from a single footprint. Let's see how Irv analyzes a footprint.
Quite often, footwear impressions are found at a scene of a crime. Everybody has to walk in and out of a crime scene, so there's always a good chance that footwear impressions are going to be left behind by a suspect who commits a particular crime. In a lot of circumstances, the shoes that made those impressions have features that are unique, and those features are sometimes so unique that an identification can be made between a footwear impression found at a scene and a pair of shoes that might be found later on a suspect, for example. Of course, we would make notations about where this footwear impression is found. We would take measurements so we could describe accurately to the court this is exactly where we found this piece of evidence. What we will also do is we will use dental stone to make a cast of a footwear impression found at a scene. And simply by mixing up the dental stone and pouring it into a footwear impression found at a scene, we can make a mold, three-dimensional mold of a footwear impression.
There is a lot more work and dedication that goes into forensic science than what you see on television. Luckily, people like Irv Albrick are around to keep our cities safe.
That was really amazing. I really hope you enjoyed our show today. Make sure you tune in next week at 4 p.m. for these riveting stories.
Fitness. Been doing personal training for a number of years, and I've also been doing bodybuilding for a number of years. And within the last 2 years or so, I've had numerous amount of competition.
Well, you know, prior to Canadian Idol and being on TV to that extent, because I appeared in some artist videos and things like that, but in terms of the profile Canadian Idol's brought, it's certainly opened more opportunities for me to do more business with more people with less of a climb, so to speak.
Well, I hope you enjoyed your time with us today. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Brown.
And I'm Kayla Smith. Thank you for watching The Journal.